hasn't been easy the last few weeks to be a Catholic Christian. With the scandal involving Archbishop McCarrick and now the release of the grand jury report from Pennsylvania, there's been a lot of emotion, I think, for all of us. There's anger, there's frustration, there's embarrassment. How can this continue to keep happening in the church? And I don't pretend to have any of the answers to any of that, but I'd like to share with you a few reflections I've had through prayer on how we move forward as people of faith, as members of the body of Christ, as the church. You need to remember, the church is not the institution. It's not the bishops. It's not the Vatican. It's us, the body of Christ. So two thoughts that have come to me in prayer in all of this. And the first actually came from a question one of my parishioners, who I highly respect, asked me on the Feast of the Assumption a few days ago, when she turned to me after Mass and said, "Father, why are you still a priest? Why are you still part of all of this?" And I'd be lying if I said that thought had not crossed my mind at times in all of this, with the embarrassment of it. But it also got me thinking about something that a dear priest friend of mine that has since passed said to me on the day of my ordination. And he said, "John, in your vows it doesn't say it, but it should say for better, for worse, just like in a marriage." And it got me thinking that right now we're in the worse. But for those of you who are married, I can't speak for you, but I would guess you'd probably be able to relate to what I'm saying, is that sometimes you do want to strangle your spouse. Sometimes your spouse really screws things up. Sometimes they make big mistakes. Sometimes they hurt you. But we are in it for better, for worse. And we are the church. As I said before, it's not the bishops. It's not the Holy Father. It's not the institution. It's us. And this is a time for us to hold the church accountable, to push for reform, but also to never forget that we too make up the body of Christ. Something that came to me in prayer the other day is, as all these horrible things were going on that the grand jury report brought out, Mother Teresa was also caring for the sick, the dying, the hungry. And that countless priests, religious, and good people of faith were out there where no one was seeing it, feeding the hungry, taking care of the sick, taking care of the homeless, making a difference. That even though this horrible thing was going on where the church fell down in a big way, the church was also doing great things. And that happens through us, the body of Christ. So that should reassure us that even in the midst of this scandal, even in the midst of this moral failure on the part of the institution, we as people of faith are called to keep pushing forward, to keep pushing for change, to keep pushing by our works of charity to be the body of Christ. This gets into my second thought. When I was praying the other day, I got the image in my mind of that incident in the Gospel of St. John after the resurrection when Peter is asked by Jesus, "Do you love me?" Peter messed up big time. He failed Jesus. He denied him prior to the crucifixion. And let's not forget, Peter was the first pope. He was the leader, and he messed it up. But when he comes back to Jesus repenting and want to change, what does Jesus ask him? "Peter, do you love me?" And when Peter says yes, Jesus 3 times gives him what he needs to do. Feed my sheep. And my friends, I think that's what we need to concentrate on in this as well. We can't change the past. We need to pray for those who are victimized and are scarred by that. We need to push for reform and change in our church. And we need to feed the sheep. To be out there, taking care of the sick and the suffering, feeding the homeless, making casseroles, getting involved in a ministry, taking care of homebound, all those things that sometimes go unnoticed, but that are the church alive in the world, that are feeding the sheep. It's how we, the body of Christ, continue to change and to reform and convert from this horrible moment in our church's past, and this horrible moment that challenges all of us to reconnect to the Lord himself, to convert our own hearts and lives, and to make sure that we're feeding the sheep. As I said, I don't have any of the answers, but I wanted to share with you some of my thoughts on how we find hope, how we move past those negative feelings of anger and frustration, disappointment and embarrassment, and how we continue to be that body of Christ. The church has faced many bad scandals in the past. The church, sadly, is a very human institution. It's called to great things, but like all of us, it's made up of sinners. This is one of those for worse moments. But if we stay focused on Christ, if we listen to what he told St. Peter, to concentrate on feeding the sheep, then we can be those instruments of change, those instruments of conversion, those instruments of reform. And after all, we are the body of Christ. We are the church. This is not the time to walk away. This is not the time to abandon the church. Just like as spouses, when your spouse messes up, it's really tempting to walk away, to close the door. But we know that's not what marriage is about, and that's not what faith is about. May God inspire all of us to be that body of Christ we're called to be, to help change the church that we're a part of, and to be the instruments of that change, so that we can get back to what we're called to be, the instruments of Christ in our world. Not a sermon, or as I said, not the answers, but just some thoughts I wanted to share with you for all of us to reflect on.